it's crucial for people to understand that, yes, you can run in barefoot shoes, but you need to transition properly. It may take 6 weeks, it may take 6 months, it might take 6 years, but if you understand that there's a need to train properly to be able to get there, although the body has the capacity to do that, that's not optimal. So we want to transition properly. Part of the goal of doing the speed project, we wanted to prove that we could put a lot of miles on our bodies and be able to do it. But at the very end, I think it was like the last half mile, we literally took our shoes and socks off and ran barefoot in Vegas as a team to the Las Vegas sign, right?
You need to be able to show the performance side. We know this is true. We know that if you transition the right way and you expose your body to the right training, that you can develop insane ability, especially in distance running, as a human being.
You can quickly see that almost in the snap of a finger, the moment that you either take your shoes off and run or you put on a barefoot shoe, it's like almost automatically you don't want to heel strike. Self-correcting, right? There's a number of things that we talk about when it comes to the training, which is posture, rhythm, and relaxation.
Welcome back to the Restore to Explore podcast. My name is Mac, and here at the Foot Collective, we are on a mission to help more humans restore their natural health and function from the ground up so that we can all explore movement and life with more freedom and confidence. In this week's episode, our founder Nick is joined by Josh Holland, who is a movement coach, a health educator, and longtime barefoot advocate, for a powerful conversation on the role of feet in total body wellness. Josh shares his journey from martial arts to professional basketball and ultimately to becoming a barefoot coach, unpacking the pivotal moments that shaped his understanding of natural movement. They dive into the impact of modern footwear on athletic performance, the importance of reconnecting with the ground, and how mastering the hardware, our bodies, and software, our minds, can transform our health. This episode was recorded just after the Speed Project, where Josh and a team of runners completed a 350-mile relay across the desert from LA to Vegas in just over 51 hours, all while wearing barefoot shoes. This episode is a reminder that transitioning to barefoot running takes time and intention. It's a process of learning how to run slow, move mindfully, and rebuild a foundation from the ground up. And before we go, we did want to let you in on one last little secret too. Do you want to know one of the most powerful things that you can do for your foot health today? It's changing your shoes. We are probably preaching to the converted. A lot of our listeners are probably well aware of the benefits of natural footwear, but we want to reiterate that most modern shoes are too narrow, too stiff, and too cushioned, which means they don't let your feet move the way they're designed to. That's why we're super proud to be partnering with Vivo Barefoot, one of the leaders in natural footwear globally. Vivo Barefoot makes footwear that's foot-shaped, flat, flexible, and thin enough for your feet to feel the ground beneath them. And here at TFC, we believe that's exactly what your feet need to function naturally. We've personally been wearing them for years, and we've seen firsthand how powerful this transition can be for improving our own foot strength, posture, and performance. And we're really keen for you guys to try them out too. So depending on where you're starting from, of course, this transition does need to be slow and steady. We are here to support you with the training and education that you need through that journey. But if you are ready to make the switch to shoes that support the health of your feet, instead of disrupting them, then you can head to the link in the description of this episode to explore Vivo's awesome range. And to celebrate the launch of the new Primus Flow, Vivo's first barefoot running shoes, we have a special offer this week just for our audience. If you use the code TheFootCollective25, you can save 25% on selected styles until May 15, 2025. Don't think Vivos are for you? Well, you can check out our footwear finder where there's a heap of other trusted natural footwear brands from around the world with special discounts too. So all of those links are in the show notes.
Hello, TFC community. Welcome to the Restore to Explore podcast. My name is Nick, and I have the honor of hosting today's conversation with Josh Holland. Josh, welcome, and
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation, and I think it's well timed because I'll talk about some of the things that have just recently occurred and why I'm saying that this is well timed. But yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for the listeners and the viewers' time. I'm excited to chat more about all the things.
Brilliant. Lots of things to talk about. Crazy
For
time to be
sure.
alive on many levels. Well,
For
we'll stick to
sure.
health today, more or less.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to frame this, for those who don't know you, let's start with your story. You can go as long and as deep or as shallow and as quick as you want with this, but essentially, what do you do today? And what path did you take to get you there? And how has your life shaped you to be who you are today?
So with that question, I like to abbreviate it as much as I can, because there's so many rabbit holes I can go down when it comes to how I formulated, the foundation of who I am today. And sort of the abbreviated quick version is that I got my start in all of this by being in martial arts. So I usually say that I grew up in martial arts. And when people hear me say that, it's like, well, what do you mean you grew up in martial arts? My
Specific martial
father,
art or just martial arts in general?
yeah. So my father, he's recently passed away, a little over a year ago, but he created this. He was one of the first that I know of that created a blended style that he coined American Karate System. And before mixed martial arts and before UFC, my father had created this blended style that he felt like, when he was growing up, he noticed that there was a lot of people trying to figure out which style was the best style, the most effective style, whether it be Kung Fu or Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu or Goju-Ryu. And my father decided, why try to just find the one and stick to that when we can blend them together? And so I started at age 4. I was a 4-year-old learning all there is to know about martial arts and chi energy and all these different things. And as you can imagine, a typical 4-year-old probably can't grasp all the concepts that we as adults can grasp. But when you live it, right? When your father is the sensei and you're around these amazing martial artists all the time, then it sort of becomes embedded into your soul. And I typically like to talk about this piece where, since my father was the sensei, he wanted to make sure that no one thought that my brother and I were gifted a black belt, or we were gifted anything. Like, we had to work really hard for all that we achieved. And the typical route of a person starting in our system, when they would go from white belt to yellow belt, and we have a testing system where you test out, you get 3 stripes. So you get 3 yellow stripes on your white belt, and then you test for your yellow belt. And that trajectory usually is around 2 months for most people in our system. It took my brother and I 2 years to go from white belt to yellow belt. So that should kind of lay the groundwork and the framework for the type of discipline and how strict my father was, and my mom as well. She got all the way up to brown belt. My brother and I, we eventually got our black belts. I got my black belt just before I turned 12 years old. And that's a huge accomplishment, because in my dad's system, being that he was the chief of police in our hometown in Oklahoma, and he was the sensei, he wanted to make sure that we knew everything there was to know, from white belt all the way up to black belt. And then we also had to certify in CPR, first aid, and we had to test out all of the anatomy, muscles, bones, ligaments, tendons throughout the body. So imagine me as a 12-year-old understanding all of this, and that just shaped who I am today. And so my father was very big on making sure that if this is going to be part of the family business, you guys don't do anything else to divert you from, this family business until you get your black belt. When you get your black belt, then you can go on and do whatever sports you want to do. But we still had to teach, like, part of becoming a black belt, you have to test out and you have to be able to teach as a part of your curriculum. And so my dad finally let my brother and I play whatever sport we wanted to play. I chose basketball and I ran track, and I did that all through high school. And then basketball became my sport. And so I quickly learned, because in the martial arts world, we were not encouraged to lift a lot of weights. right? Like in the martial arts world, it was always about, you don't want to be too bulky, you don't want to be too big because it'll slow you down. And I kind of took to that until I got into high school basketball. And when I started lifting weights because we were required to as a part of our program, I started to notice that I was able to jump higher and run faster. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's something to this lifting weights thing that, seems to go against the grain from the Eastern philosophies, right? And so that was when I learned how to blend Eastern philosophies and sort of the Western philosophies, blend those together, disregard the things that didn't serve me well, but then take in all the things that did serve me well. And I started to really understand that there's people out there like the physical therapists and the coaches and the trainers that mean well, but sometimes we just don't know all the things, right? And so fast forward to me going to college. I went to college to play basketball on a full ride scholarship and a full academic scholarship. So I didn't have any debt coming out of college. In fact, I made money going to college because I had those 2 full rides. I did a little bit of cross country during college. I also played basketball full time, and I was the team tutor. So there's a lot of things that can go with that, but I ultimately finished. I graduated college with honors, and I decided that being in Oklahoma just wasn't enough for me. So I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to do all these things. So I decided to try my hand at modeling and acting in New York. Did that for a few years. Fast forward from there, I ended up while playing pickup basketball on the side. I thought I was finished with my basketball career, but I guess I was a late bloomer because when I got to New York, I started playing in these different men's leagues, and I got scouted and recruited to play professional basketball overseas. So I played in Qatar and I played in Mexico. And then I had a short stint of being in the NBA D League circuit before now it's called the G League. And I quickly realized that most of my teammates and people that I was playing with, I realized that if you're not at the highest peak of like athletes, then you kind of get pushed off to the side. And I wasn't one of those athletes. And I saw that like if a person got injured while playing basketball, that was kind of the end of the career. So people were coming to me to say, hey, you do this training thing. Like I need to look at something else because I can't play basketball anymore. So once I realized that, I said, okay, I want to try my hand at doing something for longevity in a career. And that's when I became a trainer. And, I got into the celebrity training world by, I guess, luck, if you want to call it luck. And that's what got me here today. Yeah, it's a lot.
Whoa, I was not expecting that.
It's a lot, man. It's a lot.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah, that is, the idea of getting a black belt. It's funny because I was going to interject with a question at one point where you said, your dad wanted to make sure that you and your brother didn't get any other people didn't get. You didn't get special treatment. And I was about to say, well, was he actually harder on you than the average person because of that? And then when you said it usually takes 2 months, it took me and my brother 2 years. I was like, okay, there's the answer. He had a high standard of like just proof of competency. And it's funny you mentioned the belt system and go into detail with that. That's good insight because at the Foot Collective, we're training guides, people who can go out and help others with their lower body health. And one of the things we do is a practical element to it where you got to be able to do a certain flow on your soulmate on this half cork 2 balance beam. And it's not like this crazy elaborate thing, but it's like the ability to do your blue belt flow, a flow at sort of, sometimes we use green circle, blue square, black diamond, that's from like mountaineering or skiing, snowboarding. And blue belt flow is like your sort of the mid difficulty level flow. It's not impossible. The average person can train up to it, but it's actually pretty difficult. And so when you're talking about the belt system, it's funny how certain physical practices have this way of paving a path to mastery, basically. Like being a black belt means you are a master in that art, in that martial art. I think there's a reason they call it martial arts because it's not just like a sport. It's like there's an element to it that's deeper, I think, than a lot of other, team sports, for example. But there's like a path to say, if you want to be an expert in this, it's paved for you, but you have to work for it. And I think that actually is a stark difference to the education system. Even it's where it's like, okay, we'll give you the certificate to say you're the expert, but you just have to pay for it and spend your energy. But we're not really going to apply the same rigor as like a black belt to you passing, right? Like I'm a physio. I went through physio school. I went to school with some people that are amazing people, extremely intelligent, high IQ people, not good physios, because they're not socially adept with communicating with another human. And when you want to work with humans, they would be great mechanics or rocket mechanics even. But when there's the human psychology element and there's a communication element, that's part of the art of like helping someone through that journey. Sorry, went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I think I was just kind of in real time soaking in how incredible that journey is and how early you started in your movement journey. So I guess one question I have, just to kind of like put a pin in feet, let's say, in my experience, people who do martial arts or who live close to the ocean, for example, and do a lot of surfing, skateboarding, have this lifestyle where they're just barefoot more or wearing less shoe, let's say. And so for you, for kids, they start wearing shoes that damage their feet very early. And then that programming carries through to adulthood where no one really questions the shoes they're wearing or the effect they have on their bodies. And 95% of people are wearing shoes that literally are damaging, deforming, and disabling their feet. They just don't know it yet. So it's like this kind of relatively still big mystery. Were you wearing shoes? Were you spending a lot of time barefoot? I bet you the foot health in your family was way better than the average. So can you talk about if feet were even a thing of relevance? And when you first put a pair of conventional shoes on, what was that like? Was it sticky with you? Was it a big part of your movement journey? I'd love to hear, just to put a pin in feet, like the history of that.
Ooh, such a profound question that I want to take the proper time to address, because it's
got
one of
40
those
minutes,
things.
so go as long as you want.
It's one of those things that I later realized was a huge piece to what I do today. You see, I've got the V on my shirt here, right? And you see, I got the Naboso on my shirt. Yeah, this is we'll talk about this too, but this is one of the pieces of kit that we got while we were doing the speed project. And I'll talk a lot about that. And then I'll tell you the story that led me into working with Vivo Barefoot, and then what allowed me to eventually become a barefoot coach. And so if we kind of backtrack a little bit, growing up in martial arts, it's very, very natural to be barefoot most of the time. And again, as I started to dive more into the world of feet and being coached properly through the curriculum of Vivo Barefoot, I realized that some of the most complex sports and complex arts usually are done with bare feet, actual bare feet, or with very minimal shoes. And so we can think about some of those things: gymnastics, martial arts, dance, even, right? Like ballet dancers, yes, of course, we know that they have some restriction in the toes, but they have a very flexible shoe and it's very thin, right? And I start to kind of think about that and I go, oh, that's interesting, right? Because for me, I grew up being barefoot. Anytime I was in a martial arts uniform, we were barefoot, right? So we do fighting and breaking, and like breaking as in breaking boards and things like that, which was a big part of what we used to do for tournaments, right? Boards and bricks. I was the one that was lighting. My dad would light boards on fire, and I would fly through the air and kick those, and all kinds of cool stuff, right?
That's awesome.
And I even you're familiar with nail boards, right? Like Sadhu boards or nail boards.
Not really.
No, well, yeah, that's a thing, especially in the foot world. But
wait, Sadhu board where there's a bunch of nails coming out of the board and it's like a pressure texture. Yeah. Okay, I've seen those. I didn't know they were called that.
Yeah, they're amazing. And I used to, so I didn't realize how important this was, but my father used to. So I had to make my own nail board that was a big board, the size of my torso, right? And his sensei, so my grandmaster, he was the one that helped us to organize like all of the the mathematics of making a proper nail board. And if you're going to incorporate that into your practice, then he would always suggest that you have to make it yourself. So you know everything there is to know about it. And what would typically happen is I would take off my gi top. My father would lie me onto this nail board. And what we would always do is we'd show the nail board, we'd throw an apple on it, the apple would stick. You know that those are real nails. Take off the apple. Then I lie on the nail board. And then my father would load me up with concrete slabs, like 6 or 8 concrete slabs. And then he would break it with a sledgehammer, right?
So cool.
And so like,
this is like cartoon superhero shit. This is so cool.
Yeah, it was quite fascinating, you know, especially as a young kid. I mean, I was doing this at like, you know, age 10, 11, 12. But what's cool about that is if you understand that the closer the nails are to each other, then there's only a certain amount of pressure on each individual nail.
Yeah,
so it's not
the load.
enough to, right. So it's not enough to puncture the skin unless they were spread out, right? But to the average person who doesn't know that, they're like, oh my goodness, this is trickery or the magic, and it's really not, right? But the same thing applies to nail boards that you stand on. And I started to realize that there's all these nerves, you know, the sensory input, the sensory receptors in the bottom of the feet that correlates to the foot reflexology, which my dad was a big part of, right? My dad was a massage therapist. He did foot reflexology. He did all these things, acupuncture, acupressure. So I knew a lot of these things growing up because my dad would involve my brother and I while he was doing his learning. So he needed someone to train, right, as a part of his practical certifications. And it was like,
your dad sounds pretty incredible. Also.
Yeah, amazing. You know, I'm fortunate to have amazing parents, and you know, even though my dad has passed away, he's still here with me. You know, it's like a lot of my upbringing reflects on the way that my parents raised my brother and I, and it's one of those situations where I'm thankful that I grew up in martial arts because, you know, not only did I grow up in martial arts and that encouraged this barefoot thing, I also, we grew up relatively poor, right? Like we didn't financially poor. I always say, make sure to make that distinction because we had a lot of love, right? So we were, you know, love rich, but financially poor.
That's the better way to have it.
Right? Which means we didn't have the ability to go out and get all these fancy shoes that everyone else had. So by the time that I did put my feet in conventional shoes, it was when, you know, I was playing basketball and we had team shoes, and I didn't really notice it until I started getting these pains in my feet that I didn't really recognize. You know, looking back on it, I know what it is. It was a restriction of my feet, right? But, you know, I thought that you needed to have support, right? I thought I needed support. You're not the only
one.
Right? And it was one of those things where it was quite typical for me and my teammates to wear shoes that were 1 or 2 sizes too small because it felt like it was supporting us a little bit more, right? But somehow I intuitively knew at a very young age, I knew that I did not want to wear ankle braces because what I started to notice is that all of my teammates that rolled their ankle and then they ended up always wearing their ankle brace because the coaches and the trainers told them you got to wear ankle braces so you don't roll your ankle. They were the ones that were always rolling their ankle, right? Now, me, I guess because I broke my ankle at a young age. I broke my ankle on a bike. I was popping willies, and you know, boys will be boys, right? And so I broke my ankle, and I remember because my dad was an EMT, right, and chief of police. My dad was multifaceted.
Even as you're going through this, I'm like, wow, this dude
right.
knew his stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you are your dad's legacy. Like he literally,
right.
all of his knowledge crystallized into you and your brother. And that is so interesting how the family lineage can just pick up all of these unique things that actually are very relevant to being healthy. What's more important than health? Like, you know, being rich in love and rich in health is way better than being rich in money. There's a lot of there's a lot of super unhealthy rich people that would give all their money for a bit more health. And you don't hear things the other way around. So I love all these different skill sets and roles that your dad had. Sorry to interrupt. I just find it so cool.
Well said, and you probably said it much better than I could have. So thank you for that. But there was a pinnacle moment when I broke my ankle riding a bike, hobbled back to the house. My dad took me to the doctor. We had to put a cast on my foot, and that was my first foray into understanding what happens when you damage the system, so to speak, right? And then you put a cast on the foot, and then that foot eventually atrophies, as we all know. You take off the cast, you see it's much smaller. And again, this was this intuitive process that was subconsciously occurring to me. And then what do you do after you take the cast off? You start to strengthen that foot to get the muscles and the bones and everything to get stronger, to eventually match the other foot that was, that's normal. And I started to understand that, like, wait a minute, when you put a brace on the ankle, that's very similar to when you have a cast on your foot. Keep in mind, this is young Josh. And I thought to myself, okay, when and if I did roll my ankle on the court, it does make sense to wear a cast for a little bit, but then I just intuitively knew that you need to take it off to strengthen it, right? That everyone else kept that cast on, or the brace on. And so their ankles were weak. And so, even to this day, some of my teammates that I know, anytime they do any kind of sports, they have to always wear an ankle brace. And then if they wear an ankle brace, then we know that further up the system, things start to occur, because if the ankle can't roll because it needed to, then what happens next? It affects the knee. And then if you brace the knee, then it affects the hip, and then you brace the hip somehow. Now you're affecting your back and everything up the system. So I had this direct understanding that, like, we need to strengthen the system, not weaken it. Right. So then we fast forward to my introduction to Vivo Barefoot. I had all this training. I was a high level athlete in basketball. I ran track and field. And I met this guy by the name of Lee Saxby. And
I met Lee.
Yeah, Lee is I still regard him as one of my mentors, even though I haven't spoken to him in a while. But he was the first person that opened my eyes to foot health. And I never forget, when I first met him, it was in New York. I was living in New York. He was doing some barefoot coaching sessions. We were at Chelsea Piers. He had a treadmill set up. And it was like, hey, Josh, come to this spot, this location, bring your typical running shoes. I thought, oh yeah, I've got these nice new Nike Air Maxes. I'm going to show this guy I know how to run. Oh no,
I bet you that didn't go as you planned.
Not at all. And in fact, I'm not sure if you want to include it or not, but I can send you the video of that. I still have that old video.
That's
I don't
awesome.
have any hair then. I was much thinner. And I get on this treadmill, and I think I'm gonna impress Lee Saxby. So I'm running on the treadmill, and he's just kind of like, okay, all right. So now I want you to try this. Put on these shoes, and let's see what happens. Well, I was very clearly overstriding when I didn't have the barefoot shoes on. I was overstriding. I was heel striking a little bit. I was swinging my arms way too much. I thought I knew what I was doing. Well, you can quickly see that almost in the snap of a finger, the moment that you either take your shoes off and run, or you put on a barefoot shoe, it's like almost automatically you don't want to heel strike. Now, if you're on a treadmill, right, self-correcting, right? If you're on a treadmill, you can still heel strike in bare feet or in barefoot shoes. But when you have a proper coach there, there's a number of things that we talk about when it comes to the training, which is posture, rhythm, and relaxation, or relax. And so when I went through that, you can quickly see, like, apples to apples. It's like the same day, the same time. And it was like this, that my running changed. And then, of course, I got all excited after we finished doing that little video. I was so pumped because Lee was, he juiced me up. He's like, dude, you're a good runner. And I told him I ran in high school and went to the state championships, and I ran in college and all these things. And he was like, man, you could be a good sprinter. So, he pumped my head up. So I go and I just start busting out like sprints in barefoot shoes, right? I had never done it before, right? Every once in a while I used to do sprints in grass with, bare feet, but like I didn't have proper training. And I can just tell you this, anybody that's gone through this, they can relate. I could barely walk the few days after that because I was wrecked. But
Yeah.
that gave me this understanding that like when you allow your foot to do what it's supposed to do, you're engaging all these different muscles that I didn't know I even had. And for a while, I thought I hurt myself, like I was my Achilles, my lower, my soleus, my gastroc, all of that was fired up. I could barely walk, but I thought, ooh, this is a challenge. What else can I do to kind of learn how to become a better runner, to become a better mover, right? And this was before Vivo really kind of dove into not immediately running with the shoes, right? So Born to Run had just come out. Everyone was talking about barefoot running. And as we know, a lot of people went out and didn't properly transition. So there was a lot of lower leg and lower limb injuries that were happening.
I did
right?
it. I experienced the same thing with my calves. I went out for a run in 5 fingers because I got so excited. I don't even run. I went out for a 5K run. And for 3 days, I literally felt like someone took a baseball bat to both my calves. And I was like, oh shit, I've never used my calves to run before. That was my insight. It's like, what that's telling me is even when I've run before, I've never felt that. Those muscles got used in a way they've never been used before. And then when you go down that rabbit hole, you're like, that's the whole point of those muscles being so powerful. And most people aren't using them for that. And then it's like, oh my God, what did I believe before that is no longer true? If that's that obvious now that I actually see it, what else am I missing? And yeah, sorry, continue. So I have the same story as you. I think most people have a story like that. I think there's probably a few people that have a catastrophic injury, but many people, I think, turn away when they feel that because they don't know how to interpret it as a lesson. They look at it as something that's bad, so that some people can just chalk off barefoot running or running in natural shoes after that because they're like, well, I did it and it hurt. It's like, well, what kind of hurt? And I wonder why. And did you persevere with it beyond that? Because if not, maybe you're missing out on the process, which is important.
Ooh, I can throw in a little nugget here from my basketball days. Whenever I would play, because I was one of the stars on the team, I'll never forget my coach used to say this thing where if someone got hurt on the court, he would come to us really quick, call a timeout, and he would ask me a question that still sticks with me today, obviously. And that question is, Josh, are you hurt or are you injured? And
That's a good distinction. That's a good distinction. Yeah.
I said, okay, right. So, and for people hearing this for the first time, it's like, of course it's proper to recognize when someone is hurt, right? We can recognize that. And we need to understand the difference between being hurt and being injured. If you're injured, you're coming out and you're probably not going to go back into the game. If you're hurt, can you carry on? If not, then let's give you a little bit of a break and let's figure out what's going on. And then let's put you back into the game, So that was huge for me. And, what I started to understand once I did my training with Lee, we then rolled out the Barefoot Movement Coach, the Barefoot Coaching Program. And back then, I think it was called Barefoot Running Coach. Now we just call it Barefoot Coach. And what I started to understand is that when you can allow your toes to splay, you typically have more engagement of the foot, right? And then more engagement of the foot allows for more engagement up the system. So I say it's, performance from the ground up. And I know you guys at TFC talk a lot about this as well, but it's like, I even wrote an article called The Overlooked Foundation. And it's one of the things that I'm going to be talking a lot about when we do this upcoming biohacking conference. But that was my sort of experience of being a biohacker, being known as a biohacker, and having 2 decades of training. And I see that there's a lot of people out there that are focusing on mental health. Great. They're focusing on nutrition. Great. They're focusing on hypertrophy and performance with all these systems. But for some reason, there's a lot of people neglecting the feet. And it's like, well, if you want better balance, stability, understanding grounding, doing all these things, that we need to be focusing on the feet. And the reason why we have some of these sorenesses is because, or these injuries, is because we don't allow our feet to do what it's supposed to do. And so this is why, like, ever since my first training with Lee Saxby was like late 2008, early 2009. And I've been just sort of all barefoot since then, and Lee challenged me one day because when I was going through the barefoot coaching program, I would show up in my Nike shoes or my Jordans because they were very fashionable. But then when we do the coaching program, I'd take those shoes off and put on the Vivo barefoot shoes. And I thought I was cool, right? I thought like I'm doing the right thing. And he just, how Lee is, right? He just looked me straight in the eye and said, "Bro, like, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "No, I'm doing the barefoot lifestyle." And he was like, "But you just showed up in these things, this is not helping you. It's just like you're putting yourself into a cast to then open yourself up and then put yourself back into a cast. The lifestyle of barefoot is not just your time that you're training, it's your lifestyle." And that was when I immediately thought, okay, I get rid of all of my shoes and now I have nothing but Vivo barefoot, right?
The Jordans still look cool. They're just no longer clothing. It's like a piece of art instead of clothing.
It's a piece of art. And keep in mind, like I obviously still have a few pairs of expensive shoes that I might wear out every once in a while, but I promise you this, I do my best to undo any of that pain, because as we all know, when your feet splay and your feet get stronger, they typically get a little bit wider, a little bit thicker. So it's harder to squeeze back into those narrow shoes.
It is.
And I don't like the way it makes me feel. And another cool story, or cool, I guess, interesting story is because of my years of playing basketball in the size too small shoe, I started getting plantar fasciitis. I didn't know what that was, but it manifested as heel pain. And I thought that it was, heel contusions. I thought I was bruising my heel. And so what did I do? I went to go get heel pads. So, and then I was wearing extra soles in my shoes, which further restrict the movement of the feet. And then I'm
get
going
deeper
out
and deeper into dependence, right? It's like dependence begets dependence. And before you know it, you're, we call it the cave. The metaphor we give at TFC is the cave of comfort, right? It's comfortable, but the deeper you go into the cave, the harder it is to climb back out of that and come out and be able to explore, because you just get limited and dependent on all these things. Could be people, could be drugs, could be shoes, could be supports, whatever. And I think sometimes people just don't think they have the option to develop strength, capacity, resilience, because they've never, probably a lot of people. So culturally in your family, it sounds like physicality, understanding the body, understanding how the body as a system works was a big part of like your family, right? Just from your dad and what he picked up and what he was interested in. And just the fact that you were physical, right? Like your family had a physical practice. So sometimes I think what we know about the body now, and maybe growing up, we can take for granted that other people also know that. And the reality is when you talk to most people about the body, they have no idea how any of this hardware works and how the behaviors we do affects the health of our body. And I think sometimes for me, it's refreshing to just remind myself of that and be like, yeah, sometimes I have conversations with people where I'm like, how can you not understand this? It's so simple. But, most people are just a willingness to be curious about that is a big first step. And it's easy to take for granted that other people also have this relationship with their body, this sense that like you had to probably, even just the nail board itself, I find radically interesting as a tool to build body awareness, radical body awareness. Because if someone went on there, lied on that board, same distance between each nail, so the same theoretical load distribution, but they didn't know how to actually have their body relax into it, and they had way more pressure in one spot than a bunch of other spots because they were stiff or tight or something was wonky, it would hurt them.
Yep.
And it's not because the nails are different. It's because they just have a less awareness for how their body moves, how things feel, how to make sense of what they're feeling. If they have pain, what is that? Making sense of it. For a lot of people, it's like, oh God, I did something bad. For a lot of people, the distinction between hurt and injured, feeling hurt is feeling injured until proven otherwise. And so their whole body's nervous system treats it as such. And then it's just, again, that slippery slope to dependence. Like, well, now I need drugs to make me feel better, so I don't have to think about it, but it's going to come back. So I have to take more of the drugs to get rid of it. And then I'm going to go see someone and they're going to give me a fix to make me feel better. But if they're not teaching me why it happened in the first place, why the way I live my life is contributing to this, then I'm always on this sort of dependency, this disease care dependency. And we were talking before we started recording, this notion that we're leaving a world where we treat symptoms of disease, and we're entering a world where we all gain more empowerment by just understanding how our bodies work and sharing that with other people. And that's really exciting. I think that's maybe, and it seems, just to kind of, put a point in this, is it seems to me like feet have been a gateway to open people's mind to say, oh, if all I have to do is get rid of shoes that are damaging my feet, spend a bit more time barefoot, go for walks, and I don't need to take extra time out of my day to do that, and I feel this much better and connected and aware, and the pain I had for 3 years is gone in 3 months. It's like, what else can I do that might not be super fancy that could make me feel that much better? And then it seems like people start to drift into, oh, well, what am I eating? How am I sleeping? What's my mental state like? And I think that's the cool thing with feet is they're your foundation. They're what literally connects you to the planet. And they seem to be the first domino for a lot of people. And I think it gives extra credence to talking about feet beyond just like a random esoteric, abstract body part that we just chose. It's like, no. This is important because not a lot of people are talking about it. Everyone's wearing clothing that damages this body part. So improving it is literally as simple as stop wearing the shoes that are damaging your feet. Do nothing else different. You'll feel better. And it seems to just be this athleticism unlock. And all the athletes I've worked with, it almost seems like their feet are like this governor. Like they have governors on engines, right? You have an engine that can output 1,000 horsepower. You might have a governor at 300 horsepower for the safety of the engine, right? It's like if a person doesn't know how to drive this car, put the governor on. They only get a third of the power, and they're probably not going to crash because they don't know how to handle that amount of power. And when you open up the governor, you're allowed to reach the full potential power of that machine. Simplistic metaphor, but machine. And it's almost like the human body is this magical, biological, engineered machine, for lack of a better word. That's like alien tech. Machine is not enough of a word to explain how incredible this thing is, but for lack of a better word, let's say machine. And it's almost like people wearing shoes that confine their feet is like they're putting a governor on the health and function of their body. And with higher end athletes, they're pushing the limits of their horsepower already. So by removing the governor, just by changing their shoes, spending some time barefoot and doing some basic conditioning, they're unlocking a giant amount of power relative to the amount of work they put in to unlock that. And I think that is what's going to catch the professional athlete community in terms of unlock your feet, you unlock durability and performance almost instantaneously.
Bingo.
And that's incredible.
Yeah. I love how you also have analogies. Like I'm very big on analogies because it's a really, I think, easy storytelling piece for people to relate to. And, similar to the hurt or injured piece that I was talking about before, something that you just touched on that is also part of my ethos, if you will, is this idea of hardware and software, right? And that is important because
I love that, man.
I learned a long time ago working with Lee and doing this barefoot coaching stuff that like, for instance, if I'm taking someone through, let's call it like a deep squat, right? And we notice that they have some limitation around the ankle. A lot of times people just think that they can't get into a squat because of their knees or their hips. And that might be true, right? That's the hardware piece, the physicality of the body, right? But then what happens if you elevate their heels, put their heels on a block or something, they get into this beautiful deep squat? Well, that should quickly tell you that it wasn't your knees or your hips that was preventing you. It was actually the ankle, right? And so when you can sort of encourage them to force, gently force that dorsiflexion at the ankle and to sort of lengthen the lower leg at the gastroc or the soleus or even the Achilles, when you can start to lengthen that a little bit and then push into that dorsiflexion around the ankle, maybe do some flossing, different things, then you start to see that, wait a minute, that was actually a software issue, right? The software is the brain, right? The brain was telling you that, oh, this is going to hurt if you push beyond comfort, right? it's going to hurt, it's going to get injured, when in actuality, we're just trying to push a little bit beyond, tell the body that it's okay, tell the hardware it's okay to go to this range. And then the next time you do it, hopefully the software remembers, right? Or it's a software update. And so I like to talk about that because, we want to have more autonomy when it comes to performance and health and wellness. And when we always look out externally for people like myself or doctors or physical therapists to heal us or to help us, then we forget that we have the power within ourselves to explore. I love that you guys call this podcast Restore to Explore, because the idea is to explore. We want to explore through our bodies, through our minds, through the world. We want to explore. And, it's like I discovered very quickly, because I was wearing narrow shoes to play basketball and do all these things, that I started to develop bunions. And bunions weren't a thing in my family. And I remember one of the important stories that I have is when I first moved to New York, I was still deep into playing basketball. And I remember sitting on the subway and seeing the advertisements on the subway car, like for podiatrists. And you could go, and if you have bunions, call this number for bunion surgery. Right. So I was like, well, it worked for me. That advertisement worked for me because I was dealing with bunions and having foot pain. I didn't know what else to do. And luckily for me, I was right in the midst of doing this barefoot coaching program. And we talked about bunions and Morton's neuroma and all these different things. So I was starting to understand more about the foot, even though I'm not a podiatrist, but I'm starting to understand that, like, wait a minute. So I talked to Lee and some of the other coaches and said, hey, I actually made a call about possibly having to, get a consultation about bunion surgery. What are your thoughts on that? And they're like, no, at least try some of these things to see if it helps you. And then if you need to go into surgery at some point down the line, then maybe. And I'm happy to report that I never had to get bunion surgery. And in fact, like you can still see that maybe I had a bit of a knot at some point. I probably had bunions, but it's kind of self-corrected now because I've done all the work. I've learned how to wake up my toes by doing toga or toe yoga. And I wear toe spacers, and and I do, like, I'm sure all about Naboso, but I do their, the neural ball, and I use the neuro stick. And, this is one of the things that has really opened up my world of, like, well, wait a minute, if I can sort of undo my need to have to go and have bunion surgery, how can I help other people out there who are considering to get bunion surgery, thinking that, well, woe is me, life dealt me a bad hand, I guess I have to have surgery to fix it. It's like, well, no, you may not. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So I love what you guys do at TFC. In fact, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I'm actually going through the TFC guide certification in Austin coming up.
I'll be there.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm running it with Jim.
Dope. So we'll get a chance to work together.
Amazing.
And,
and play together. Play.
It's
all about
exactly.
play.
It's all about play.
I look forward to it.
I was so happy because, when I told you I wrote that article about the Overlooked Foundation, I am extremely happy that we have people like you guys, like your platform, to sort of prove that wrong. It's like we at Vivo Barefoot, you guys at TFC, and Naboso, and even MoveNat. Are you familiar with MoveNat?
Yep. Or one.
So MoveNat was one of my first certifications back in the day, and it's very similar to what you were talking about with the practical piece of TFC.
Yeah, they got a pretty rigorous testing.
You're telling me, bro.
It's good though. It's good. I mean, you as a black belt, you're not gonna have a problem, but it's good. It creates, I don't know if you want to go here, but just in case, we had this discussion the other day where, so we have this blue belt flow. Everyone needs to pass that to show competency to run a TFC event. That's like the caveat. It's like, you want to be a guide, you come to the certification, you do the work. If you do the theory test and you pass your blue belt flow cleanly, Not like you got lucky and you got it. Like you could do it cold because you're way beyond the blue belt flow, but you can smash out a blue belt flow if someone asked you because you're comfortable with it. It's in your zone of like Goldilocks zone. And we just had this discussion of, is that inclusive? Like people are saying, well, I'm never going to be able to do the blue belt flow. It's too advanced. It's not very inclusive to have something like that. We want things to be more inclusive. And I kind of just, what I thought of was actually what's important is it's accessibility, not inclusivity. Because the idea that you do the TFC Guide Cert means you are part of an exclusive group of people who decided to put a lot of effort to learn something, put in the work, and be, frankly, an expert from experience, be an authority through experience and knowledge and work that you can prove because you have to demonstrate capacity, you have to do a test. You're an exclusive group of people who have decided that matters, and the result of that is that people want to come see you because you've actually done the most work to master this topic, to gain experience and both practically and theory, and just literally studying. Like we do guide training every 2 weeks as a digital gathering. All the guides come and we practice, we get reps on explaining concepts that are on this cheat sheet of like, how can you explain the concept of disease care and healthcare? Explain it in 5 minutes. Go. Let's see how you do. Everyone gets a rep. We all get better. We all get to hear each other's reps. And we all get to essentially master the ability to answer any question that comes to us, not necessarily with a defined answer, but the ability to ask a better question or the ability to start a discussion about first principles so that you can help the other person understand how to get to the right answer, not tell them what to think, give them the tools to get there themselves. And that's, it's exclusive to have a black belt. It's exclusive to be a TFC guide. I think accessibility is important. So, what obstacles are trainable, what obstacles are finite. Like if you have a knee replacement, your knee literally won't bend beyond 70 degrees, and so you can't get into the transition from one stance to another in your blue belt flow. Okay, then that's an asterisk. So it's like, okay, well, let's take that out because you don't have the capacity based on your circumstances. I think accessibility should be accessible to anyone, right?
Well
Maybe
said.
not anyone, but if you want to teach this stuff, you got to be able to lead by example. That's the theory of all this, right? If you want to teach others karate, you got to be an expert. You got to be a master. The way you do that is you go through the process of getting a black belt, which is a ton of work and time and energy spent towards a goal in order to achieve mastery so you can then pass on the craft to others behind you, right? And it's the integrity of that dojo that makes sure you earned your blue belt or you earned your black belt. And it's the integrity of us ranking people that submit a blue belt flow to say, if you're going to go to an event with a TFC guide, we can tell you that they have earned the right and the capacity and shown competency to be able to give that event. Like it's not going to let down because we have a high standard. And I think that's important. And I think that's where the world of healthcare will be dominated by people who are good at helping others, not people who have a piece of paper that's very expensive, which may be good or not. We don't know. But that paper is no longer satisfactory. If I'm going to send my mom to go see someone because she won't listen to me, if I got to go send her to see someone and you give me the choice of 10 orthopedic surgeons, 10 doctors, 10 physios, and then one guide, I'm sending them to the guide every single time. Bingo. Not a question. No doubt, because I understand what's built into that. I don't understand if other people actually live the lifestyle of being healthy. Because I know a lot of disease care pros that are struggling hard, that are broken down, that aren't having a good time, but they're trapped in that business model. And I think a lot of them want to get out. And I think it's so exciting to hear that you're going to be a guide and that there's more and more guides each year, because this is just a fleet of people who can go out and lead by, show people and be the example. That is not the culture in disease care. That is, I think, the culture in healthcare. And awesome that I'm going to see you in Austin.
Bro, I'm excited for it. I'll piggyback on what you just mentioned quickly, because I'd love to be able to talk a little bit about the Speed Project before we wrap up, if possible.
Do you want to go a little bit longer? I know I said an hour, but if you have more time, I'm good.
I have plenty of time for you, bro. Cool. So touching on what you just mentioned, which I think is really important to discuss, is what I learned throughout my time with Vivo Barefoot in the coaching program is there's a difference between a coach, an athlete, and sort of the hybrid of the two, right? Because, for instance, we know that, like, let's say in the world of basketball, an NBA all-star may not be the best coach, right? And then the best coach may not be the best athlete. But when you can find someone that can kind of do both, that's where I think we want to be. That's where I strive to be, is someone who can physically be able to carry out some of the things, right? Like, if I'm talking about being able to get into a deep squat and hold that for a period of time, but I can talk about it. I can, do the theories around it and explain all these, complex words around that. Like, that's cool. But if I can't show it, then what am I doing really? Right.
Right.
But then conversely, if I can only show it, but I can't really explain it, then also, okay, how do I expect anyone to jump on board with that? So what I try to do is to show a little bit of all of it. And I think that leads me to what we did for the speed project just recently. Like, we just finished this past weekend. And for those who don't know, the speed project is this underground event that is unsanctioned. It's completely underground, in which you take either solo runners or a team that basically run a relay style. We run from LA, from Santa Monica Pier, all the way to Las Vegas, right? So it's like 350 miles. And we had a team of 9. And Vivo Barefoot was the first team to do it in barefoot shoes. And it was perfectly timed for the rollout and the launch of our new running shoe, right? Because if you're familiar with Vivo Barefoot, you know that, we haven't really had a running shoe. A lot of the people that we work with, even ourselves, like, unless you're like very deep into it, like I am, we typically didn't encourage people to run in them until we could really understand that concept and roll out, a piece of kit that would work for that. And so we just came out with the Primus Flow, and I'm currently wearing the one of the shoes now, the Primus Flow. It's a little dusty because it was in the desert, but
It's got some good patina.
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to be able to record the barefoot running guide. So if you were to go to vivobarefoot.com right now, if anyone were to purchase the Primus Flow, you get the barefoot running guide for free as an add-in on your cart. Or if you're someone that is just curious about how to transition properly to running barefoot, then you can just go there. I think it's like $13 or whatever. And I think I even at some point I'll have a code if people want to open that up for free to go through the course. But I spent some time going through that because we understand how important it is. It's crucial for people to understand that, yes, you can run in barefoot shoes, but you need to transition properly. Some people, it may take 6 weeks, it may take 6 months, it might take 6 years. But if you understand that there's a need to train properly to be able to get there, it'd be like another analogy, right? If you are, a sedentary person that is just, a weekend warrior, and then you decide to go and sign up for a high rocks competition or a CrossFit, competition, we understand that you're going to wreck yourself, right? You're going to be wrecked.
Yes.
Right. It's just
Most
like,
certainly.
let's face it. Right. And
if
that's
you're actually pushing it. Yes.
right. And then that correlates to trying to throw on a pair of barefoot shoes and go sprinting or go for a long 5K or 10K or whatever, like you and I did. Right. And so if you just understand that, although the body has the capacity to do that, that's not optimal. So we want to transition properly. And part of the goal of doing the speed project is that, we wanted to prove that we could put a lot of miles on our bodies and be able to do it. In fact, so we ran most of the whole race in our barefoot shoes. We have a couple different types, different colors and all that kind of stuff. But at the very end, I think it was like the last half quarter mile, we literally took our shoes and socks off and ran barefoot in Vegas as a team.
I love it.
To the Las Vegas sign, right? And that's just to show, I mean, people might look at that and say, oh, these guys are showing off or whatever. But no, we're proving that what we do actually works, right? And so we hope that
leading by example. It's like, we're not going to
leading
tell
by
you
example.
that these are the best. It's like, we're just going to show you. And we have to say
That's
way
right.
less, because then it's the same reason why it's like, you can explain to someone the best way to reclaim a squat, but the ultimate thing that determines whether they take you seriously or not is essentially your ability to prove that it works, which is you getting into a squat. And at the end of the day, you need to be able to show the performance side. We know this is true. We know that if you transition the right way and you expose your body to the right training sort of variables, that you can develop insane ability, especially in distance running, as a human being. We know this to be true. We just have to show that it's true. And right now, there really hasn't been big enough natural footwear companies to have money to spend on showing the world. Like, they haven't really cared, frankly. It's like, who cares? People are finding out we're going to sell these shoes. People are realizing slowly but surely. But then you get to a certain point where it's like, okay, let's increase the size of our exposure and microphone, and let's just literally put us on the map from a performance standpoint by kicking all the other companies' asses. Like, that's the that's the peak messaging, is literally just crush it, and then the world can actually make the judgment themselves and say, oh wow, people at this level are wearing natural footwear. Well, clearly this isn't just a niche thing anymore. This isn't like Jimmy the Weekend Warrior wearing Vibrams. This is like mainstream high performance. And the irony is, it's performance enhancing to allow your body to function naturally, because the natural state is incredibly performant. It performs so well. And I love your software hardware analogy. Just to go back to that for a sec, it's just like, I think that's a really good analogy for a lot of people, because most people are familiar with that technology term because they have phones, right? The physical phone is the hardware. The information that tells the phone what to do is the software. And I think for me, helping people understand that the behaviors they do every day, every behavior you do is an update to your software. The question is, are you updating your software with shitty behaviors? Like, every 8 hours of sitting is a lot of software updates that are like for malware. It's like shitty software. And a lot of people are running like Windows 92, and then trying to go out and do these activities or high intensity training things. It's like, dude, you're running Windows 92. Let's bring yourself into the 2000s before you try anything crazy,
Right.
And every movement you do is a software vote for the kind of capacity you're going to have in your body. And the minute you start, reprogramming your software by going for a walk, spending an hour less in a chair, switching to natural shoes, giant software upgrade, because now your body gets all this fresh input to recalibrate everything to its natural state. And I think just in general, not only at the performance end does it make perfect sense, but now it's cool to see it being shown. But at the everyday person's end, it's actually fairly intuitive. I think what's interesting is the way I describe foot health now is radically simpler than when I first started, because it actually lands way better when you just let people know, like, if you realize your shoes are damaging your feet, do you think it would be helpful to stop damaging your feet? Yeah. It's like, I'm not even gonna tell you anything else to do. Just delete the shitty software. Delete the shoes. Delete the shoes that damage your feet. That's all I'm asking. And go for a walk every day. And most people will do so well. So,
of course, it's like to your point, if our phones start acting weird, or our computer starts acting weird, what do? We try to reset it, right? It's like we either turn it off for a while and turn it back on, or look for software updates.
And that's literally a software update.
right. And that's the check engine light, so to speak, or the check body light, or whatever you want to call it. But like that's something we need to adhere to. But for some reason, we understand that for our devices, but we tend to neglect that for our bodies. And so when your feet are hurting, and your knees or your whatever, like, that's the check engine light, and that's your body asking for an update. And so go in and try to get better circulation by using some of these tools that I was just showing earlier, or like you said, just take off the shoes and go for a walk, or wear natural shoes and go for a walk. Because believe it or not, that's one of the main things I ask all my clients as a trainer and as a health coach. Like, walking is one of the best things that we can do, because it's something that we can do far longer than we ever could run, right? Like, I'm not saying that there's not ultra marathoners out there and whatever, but like, that aside, like, we should all be able to just go for a walk, right? And there was a study that was done where, that we talk a lot about in Vivo, is that there was a group of students that they spent, I think it was 6 months, they spent 80% of their time in Vivo barefoot shoes. And all they were asked to do was just walk around, live their life 80% of the time in the shoes. They tested their foot strength before, and then they tested them again at the end. And it was a 57.4% increase in foot strength just by walking in the shoes. And it's like, well, I think the average person who's a go-getter would think, well, if they got that amount of increase in foot strength from just walking in the shoes, what would happen if you actually did foot exercises and actually really worked with your feet?
Yeah.
On top of doing all that, what would happen, right? And then I start to think about like using the toes and using a stronger foot to jump higher for these, for these high level athletes and to run faster, because, the foot is very, very much involved in all of that. Right. So yeah, I think it's really important, the things we're talking about. I hope more and more people start to understand that we're not trying to just be cool on social media. Like, this really is a part of what we do day to day. If at any point someone sees me on the street, chances are I'm going to be in barefoot shoes. I'm walking the walk, right? Walking the talk. My podcast is called Simply Walk the Talk because that's what I do.
Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, man, lots to go over. I mean, I'm certain we missed so much, but one of the things that I am happy about is that we do get a chance to finally, meet in person, and, maybe I have you on my podcast so we can talk, a little bit, in reverse, me
Cool.
interviewing you. But, and I'm sure there's some takeaways that I'm missing here, but I think one of the main things that I learned is that we do have autonomy, right? We should be able to fix ourselves, right? And then if not, then there should be other resources out there to kind of help us through. And yeah, if anybody ever has any questions or comments on what I do, like, I would be more than happy to help out any way I can.
Yeah, and it's a little, now in the age of healthcare, if you want to run better software, just find someone that looks like they're running good software, is moving well, is healthy, feels good, and just ask them what they did. Like, what downloads are you doing? Like, what are you doing with your movement health? How are you spending your days? Like, I think when you're healthy, when you're moving well, like, I facilitate pickleball at a local gym. There's a lot of people in the club. There's 6 indoor pickleball courts, and there's a lot of people that are first-time pickleballers. So they come in, we show them how to play. We run them through like a round robin social for a couple hours. And one of the things I love is just people ask you questions because they observe you moving well, having fun, and, not getting hurt, or not looking like you're hurt, right? The movement is fluid, it's clean. And so people innately ask others who are moving like they want to move for tips if they're curious. There's a lot of curious people at this club, so it's a lot of fun. And I think the era of healthcare, and I think if you're listening and you view yourself as a lower extremity health professional or a lower body health professional, not to say it's the only place you work with, but if you work with the human lower body and you are helping people with their health, you are a healthcare professional. I don't care if you're a doctor, personal trainer, orthopedic surgeon, yoga instructor, Pilates instructor, like, there's a long list. If you work with the human lower body, the most effective thing you can do to help more people and help those people more is help them walk away from shoes that damage their feet. That's literally the cheat code. When I say walk away, I literally mean ditch the shoes and walk away from those shoes. Because if you just wear the shoes but you sit on a couch every day, the shoes don't do much. You do need to move. But I think if we can make it so, a really cool metaphor that I like is the idea of smoking. So I can't remember what it was, 50s, 60s, doctors would literally, this is not hyperbolic or bullshit, doctors would literally recommend cigarettes for people to treat certain ailments. They would recommend cigarettes to pregnant women. Okay? If we can just take a second and sit in how ridiculous that sounds. But at the time, that was the culture. They were doing the best they could. Then it shifted where they're like, we should probably stop recommending cigarettes, right? And then there's a period where, like, they're not doing that anymore for a good reason. because they had better information that came out and permeated into the culture and got over the hump of like marketing money. And then it got to a point where, wow, this thing is so bad for people that it's actually basically malpractice. If someone comes in and says they smoke cigarettes and they're having health problems, it's malpractice to not inform that person that smoking cigarettes is bad for their health. Maybe you're the first person to ever tell them that. Your duty as a doctor is to tell them, hey, this thing's messing you up. You may or may not already know that. If you're still doing it, then you're not able to stop doing that, or you don't know that's bad for you. So I'm going to make sure you know cigarettes are bad. Stop smoking them. It's really bad for your health on many levels. I think this is a perfect paradigm for how we're looking at it right now, right? You have foot problems, go buy a really built up shoe. That's what doctors are currently doing. It's like cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
It'll make you feel better. I don't really understand feet well enough to know to tell you the long-term consequences of what I'm telling you to do. All I know is these shoes are supportive. They're going to feel real good. Go get a pair. And I think health professionals are going to go through a wave where they, through personal experience, ideally, right? The person wears natural shoes, says, oh shit, my feet feel way better. Oh my God, my other shoes were destroying my feet. That's why I was at a disadvantage. Where every health professional, if we can adopt as a gold standard that every single lower extremity health professional, regardless of their specialty or domain, should be recommending people stop wearing unnatural shoes as the gold standard de facto of care. Where like, if you're not doing that, you're not really doing your job. You're probably not a bad person, but like you need to update, because if you're the authority, people are coming to see you and you're not taking on the onus of updating your knowledge to be current, you could be harming people unintentionally. When we get to a point where everyone's like, every time someone has a foot problem, they go see someone and the gold standard is stop wearing shoes that damage your feet. All footwear companies everywhere have to change.
Yeah.
Or they get blockbustered or they're gone. And they're all going to change. And we're just very early in this transition. And I think the fun of it is that there's so many. If you go out to 100 people, probably 99% of those people you can help in a radical way if you just tell them that point. Stop wearing shoes that damage your feet. If you don't know what that means, here's the elements to identify whether or not a shoe is damaging your foot. It's that simple. And then we can talk about developing more capacity. And the thing that I said at the start, this whole domino effect is like, if you can tell that person that, and if they do it, follow through, see how good they feel, and realize one simple change of deleting something that was harming me that I didn't know, but now I realize, and now I feel the difference, made a drastic difference in my health. What other domain of my health can this carry through on? Because, do people realize that when they look at blue light all day, every day, it disrupts sleep, makes them tired? They have more drugs to keep themselves stimulated, and it's a cycle. Like all you have to do to break that cycle is just a bit of awareness. It's like one sticky click where someone's like, oh, that makes sense. And I did it and I feel better. And now I want to tell everyone I know, because they don't know that. I was pretty well informed. I didn't know that. Now I do. I want to tell everyone. So moral of the story is tell everyone to wear natural shoes. Josh, that was a really fun podcast. I'm excited for Austin. It's a 2-day cert. So we have 3 nights at least in Austin, and there's a night where we just need to decompress, but the other nights, like, we want to go to dinner, to like long dinners, have meals with guides or guys that are at the cert, and have really fun discussions like this. And so if you're listening to this, I thank you for your attention, for trusting us with your attention and getting to this point. We hope you enjoyed this. Josh, I really had fun. I'm very grateful for your time. I'm grateful that you're becoming a TFC guide. I think it's just like the most awesome people seem to self-select to become guides. And it's an honor to be alongside all these people and be like, we're on Team Foot Health. I don't care if you're Vivo Barefoot or you're Tolos Footwear or you're the Foot Collective or you're Naboso. Like, we are Team Foot Health. We have a real good team. We have the truth on our side, and we're all aligned with just, through our own, we can disagree on how we do the things we do. It's probably good we all do them slightly differently, but we need to agree on the fundamentals. And when we do, we create this really robust foundation of truth where we can all go out into the world, live our work, and be so confident that it works, because every day we're reinforcing the fact that that is true. I went barefoot yesterday. I went for a 3-hour walk in natural shoes. I feel better. I have more conviction now that this is true. And you get people with just radical conviction that are living their work. And that's what's going to accelerate this transition. And I think we can help a lot of people. So can you tell people where to go if they want to find out more about you, website or social media? And then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. So yeah, you can find me on social media. Any of the platforms is at Joshua J. Holland. So JOSHUAJHOLLAND. So at Joshua J. Holland on all the major platforms. And then my website, same thing, www.joshuajholland.com. And then, like we talked about earlier, if you want to check out the barefoot running guide that I teach, it's on Vivo Barefoot's platform. You can link to that if you want. And yeah, be on the lookout for a lot of things coming out in the future. And yeah, that's about it.
I want to put you on the spot and ask you one last question, and it has a 2-sentence answer is the cap. So in 1 to 2 sentences, 2 max, how do you define health? Take as long as you want and simmer on that until you want to answer it. And the reason I'm asking this now, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm very curious what you say. I'm also curious to see if this answer changes from now until I see you in May in Austin, because it very well may. And I'm curious to see if it does. So in 1 to 2 sentences, how would you define health?
Yeah, I will say this. The first thing that comes to mind is a bit of like a copy paste type of response, which I don't like. However, I do think that part of the response should be the absence of disease, the absence of pathology, right? I think that is sort of the overarching idea of health, right? But then I like to throw in a little bit of the positivity side of it as well, right? Because absence is kind of viewed as a negative, right? And so when a person is happy and fulfilled and optimized, I feel like that is health. And whatever that means, right? So I have the 5 pillars of optimal health and wellness. And those 5 pillars are quality awareness, which is number 1. Number 2 is quality rest and recovery. Number 3 is quality consumption. Number 4 is quality activeness. And number 5 is quality exercise. So all of those together would mean to me health.
Brilliant. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for your time.
I know it's more than two.
I was going to say it's the longest 2-sentence answer I've heard, but it was a really good answer, and I look forward to exchanging notes when we hang out in Austin. So for everyone listening, thanks for being here. We'll catch you in the next Restore to Explore podcast.
Peace.
Thanks for joining us on the Restore to Explore podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, the best way you can support us is by leaving a review and subscribing wherever you are catching this episode. If you want more free TFC training and education, are after some of our training tools, some natural footwear discounts, or want more specialized guidance from a trusted TFC health professional, then thefootcollective.com is the place to go. You'll find all of the helpful links in the show notes.